Did that work? There we go. And we are live. It's good to be here with y'all. It has been a day, let me tell you, but I am ready to kind of delve into some of these new Splinterlands reward cards finally. I got access to the Mav server and I am ready to kind of go over all of these brand new cards with you guys. I'm very excited. These are some really cool additions to the game. My only regrets really are that I won't be able to play with them for a while yet. It's going to take quite a while to get copies of these that I could use in Diamond. And so that kind of makes me sad, but these cards are really cool, and even just theory crafting with them is getting me all hype to see them in the game. So can't wait for that. And some of these will be usable, even at the lower levels in higher tier gameplay. It's just going to be, more situational in that regard. So for a while, we'll probably see them just a little bit, and then, they'll start to slowly scale in as we get more and more copies of them. So can't wait to try and max my rewards and get as many of these guys as possible. But here are all the brand new reward cards. And so I wish they would just allow you to filter this a little bit better for the different types, because this even has the old alpha and beta and untamed reward cards and things like that. It'd be nice to just see the Chaos Legion reward cards or these new Soulbound reward cards, for example, with one click. So if I had a gripe, it would be that, but that's okay. We'll let it slide on the team for right now. They've got an awful lot on their plate. And so these are some really cool cards. I really like the artwork on a lot of these. Like this guy's pretty cool looking, for example. Let's pull him up and take a look at the lore page here, if that'll load. Oh, it may not be in yet actually, but here's the card art there for that guy. I quite like him. There's a lot of riffs on fairy tales in this particular Soulbound expansion, and so you've got this Kulu mastermind, like a little Cthulhu looking guy. In Death, there is a couple of really cool cards that play on this theme. There's a little possessed puppet. There's Wile E. Coyote, which really makes me laugh. The whole idea of Wile E. Coyote as a card in this game is really cool. But the Ravenhood Warden, for example, just another Plague Doctor-esque Raven type fairy tale character. And there's just a lot of really cool riffs on some particular themes there. There's also just some really badass looking cards, like Barrack Snake Eye, for example, is one of the cooler cards just in the game as a whole right now as far as looks go. What an absolute Giga Chad right there. Really cool card to take a look at. And as far as getting the max levels of these cards, it should take about a year and a half. So that's unfortunate, especially for those legendaries and whatnot, because you're not going to be able to get to really choose what you're getting. You're just going to be able to get them through reward chests. So, we'll get some of these lower level cards pretty quick, but getting them up to these higher abilities is going to take time. So I'm going to take that into account a little bit with my assessment. See if there's good breakpoints where these cards make sense at the lower levels. And we'll be playtesting with these cards here soon in order to kind of get an idea where they fall in live gameplay. It'd be nice if, if for the Mavericks test server, if we could test these cards at different levels. Unfortunately, they just give you a 100,000 BCX copies. So you've got maxed out as your only option, really. And so having that said, it'd be nice to get to test them through these iterations to kind of figure out, is it worth it at level 5 in bronze, for example? But I realize that they don't have quite the player count to accommodate for that sort of testing, and that the Mavericks that do get a game need to be able to compete at the highest level. So totally makes sense. Just a little complaint that I have that would be nice to figure out how to resolve. And without further ado, let's crack straight into the first one. Let's start with fire and take a look at the Ferox Defender. So this is a really cool card art-wise. I feel like it's fairly situational as far as its actual application in-game. And I think that the whole Ferox play, these type of cards are really cool. I wish they would expound upon these a little bit more in the game. I haven't seen anything like this before. It seems like a really cool lore implementation. This guy's like a little blacksmith. And he's got, protect and repair and shatter. So he's all about armor, really cool thematically. However, like when it comes to practicality in the game, I don't see this being a particularly useful card except for very specific rule sets. So he doesn't have reach in order for him to be in the second position. And so that really means his only place in your lineup is going to be as a frontline tank, which he's not particularly suited for. He doesn't have any damage mitigation abilities like shield or void, for example, or even void armor to kind of help with his repair. And so he's vulnerable to magic even with 8 health. At an 8 cost, that's not really a whole lot of equivalent HP for that price. And so this card, I think, is going to be relegated to the rule set where melee attackers can attack from any position, and certain other particular rule sets like Super Sneak, for example. He might be a good like backline defender for Super Sneak, or just even a mid-range support or mid of your lineup support in order to kind of give everybody that protect and continue to repair their armor after they're getting hit. Or if you pair it with a taunt card, that could also be a really powerful strat. And so you could have him in the first position and have a taunt card in the last position, and then that way you could effectively utilize him so that he's not your primary tank, but he's an off tank, and he also provides some support. So there's definitely use cases for him. You just kind of have to plan around him a bit more than some of the other cards that we're going to talk about here shortly. Hey, Alicios, good to see you. I appreciate you being here. Hopefully you like these new reward cards so far. I think that they're super cool. None of them seem like particularly game breaking to me right now, which is good. I think that with just a little bit of tweaking, we can get these in a really nice place that people will still appreciate gathering them, but they're not going to completely blow other cards out of the water. So I like the balance here so far. It seems pretty dialed in. Up next, we have the Fire Caller, and this card seems pretty effective. It does have a little bit of anti-synergy in that it has the Martyr ability, but it has a decent health pool. It's not a lot of health, 4 health or for 5 mana at max level isn't a ton, but it does increase in health as you go up these stats, and so that is something to keep in mind if you're just looking for that Martyr ability. Now, obviously, I think this has more utility than just Martyr, especially with Fury. And we're seeing a lot more taunting monsters being introduced into the game, so I think that Fury is gaining value as we're going. And there are even some taunts in these Soulbound reward cards too, so that we're getting even more. Fury just makes a lot of sense as an ability to have, and this card definitely seems desirable for that. It does a decent amount of damage for its cost. If you pair it with Yoden Zaku, you're going to get the +1 to range, +1 to health, and the +1, or well, not +1, but plus blast. So blast is a really big deal, and at 5 damage with blast, you're going to be doing 3 damage to units aside the one you're hitting, and that can be really strong if they don't have reflection shield. So this card, I think, is going to find a use case in a lot of really prominent meta decks, and to me, the Martyrdom is just kind of icing on the cake, so to speak. Just a nice ability that when it procs, you'll be like, yay, maybe I have a better chance to win this battle. But it's not necessarily going to win you a battle all on its own or anything like that. So next up, we have the Firewatch Devil. This card seems like it might be a little overtuned, especially on first glance. It does seem like so Alicios just said 5 mana for 4 damage is good for lower mana games, plus you give Martyr to the 2 other good cards on each side. That has good potential. Totally. Yeah, the only issue I see is that you're going to have a really hard time getting your opponent to actually hit that card if they're in the 5th position, for example. So there's a card on either flank, because sneak cards are going to go to the card, to the right. They're going to hit that 6th position lineup, and opportunity cards may not hit it. You're going to have to plan around opportunity essentially and hope that your opponent brings a card with opportunity. So that situation where you're going to get that perfect 2 cards getting buffed by Martyrdom, I don't think is going to happen super often. Yeah, it's really random as to when it's actually going to happen in that circumstance. And so I see a lot more utility putting it in the 6th position, hoping it gets hit by sneak, but then you only get one of the benefit So, we're gonna have to figure out like a nice balance for that. But I think that for me, the martyrdom on that card is just icing on the cake. If you get it to proc, that's great, but it's not gonna proc every game. And so here we have the Pyrowatch Devil, 3-cost card. At max stats, it does 3 range damage with 4 speed, 4 health, and it has Life Leech, Dispel, and Oppress. So this card seems insanely good. There are very few cards with Life Leech that have more health than their starting mana cost. So like another good card to compare this to, let me take a little detour here, would be in Death, in the Chaos Legion set, the Life Sapper. So this card actually does have the 4 health and 4 speed, but it only has 2 damage at max level. And so it is magic damage, so that does mean it's going to go through armor and proc Life Leech more, so it is potentially more powerful. But that ranged ability, having that 3 damage, is still really strong for a 3-cost card, and you have Dispel. And if you take another card with Rust, for example, you might be able to get that 3 damage proc off. Or if you play the let me go back to the card before I keep talking on and on about it, sorry. If you play the Pyrowatch Devil with Yodenzaku, for example, he gets that +1 damage and blast. I mean, look out, you're getting potentially 4 damage on the main target with 2 on either side of it with Life Leech. I mean, wow, if you can find a no armor rule set, or you can find a way to get rid of the enemy's armor, this card is going to do mega damage. And that Oppress, while getting a slight buff from the amount of new cards coming out with no attack values, and the fact that weapon training doesn't count for mitigating Oppress's damage, this could be a potentially massive amount of health that this card is gaining for a single attack in the right circumstances. So I think this might be a little overtuned with just the amount of damage that it does, the amount of health that it has, the abilities that it has. But, we'll have to do some more play testing and find out. Yeah, it's definitely a must-have. I would agree with that. It seems like a really solid card. Okay, so beyond that, the next card in the reward card set here is our Summoner. And so the Eternan Brune, this card, I just really like the art for it, like having a llama summoner with a slave whip. I mean, really cool. It has like all of these different, themes compiled into one thing that you just don't really see a whole lot of games try and undertake, right? So really cool idea. As far as like the actual usability of the card, I do think that this is appropriately priced. We'll have to see, but only if you have like really good gladiators. If you have mediocre gladiators, or gladiators that are like underleveled for your ranking, then you're not really going to get much use out of this card, if any use out of this card. And so it really applies to a specific set of players that are really grinding the game out. And I get that that's their desired outcome, but it does kind of disappoint me that, like, maybe he could have been 5 costs to give even more reward to those players who are grinding, and then also some reward to just regular players, who don't have like a guild that's super high level that they can farm gladiator cards with. But it's okay if there's really niche cards in the game that only benefit certain people. That's totally allowed. And so I think this does just that. Like, subtracting -2 armor from your opponents is very strong. It's a really good ability. For 6 mana, you just won't be using him unless you have really good gladiator cards is all. And so I think that there will be scenarios in which this guy is really, really strong. We'll just have to wait and see with some more playtesting. There are some really good fire gladiator cards. Yeah, I don't know if I would choose this over Conqueror Yasik, for example, in most scenarios. Like, I think he's very niche at this price point. So just something to keep in mind. Now, this card I see as being very not niche. This is a hyper usable card, Idri Fire. Now, I think that this card is great because it's another taunting tank for fire, whereas before they only had Magnor. And so this allows you to have some more utility for that 6 cost, which means it can be used in lower card cost games. And it has all of these awesome abilities attached to it that make it more difficult to kill. And when you do kill it, it's actually going to do some damage back. So even without weapons training, this is still a really solid card. I mean, 15 EHP plus like extra abilities on top and a decent amount of speed is nothing to sneeze at. And even at level 1, this is potentially usable in higher tier games. I mean, it's still got the 4 speed, which is awesome at every level. And you've got 3 armor and 8 health with taunt at level 1. I mean, it's going to die pretty quickly because of taunt, but that might buy your fire team enough time, especially if you're playing something like Conqueror Yasik. You can put this in the very front line and then just have a whole bunch of heavy damage dealers in the back, weaken the enemy team, try and take away, one of their cards before they have the ability to counterattack. And then this guy puts up quite the bulwark for your team in order to hide behind. So I definitely think there's a lot of use cases for this card. It seems very strong, and I'm excited to get my hands on it and try it out. So this is one of the first ones where I'm like must have, other than this Pirate Watch Devil right now. But I do think he might get nerfed. So we'll have to see with some playtime. But Idri, I think, seems appropriately balanced, but just like really good for Fire in general. Like Fire doesn't really have something like this yet. So I'm excited to see what kind of avenues that opens up for the Fire team. Up next, we have the Phyrexian Hero, the first legendary in the Fire team for this new reward set. This one has Weapons Training, which is the new ability that allows adjacent monsters to gain half of this monster's attack, rounding up. So that means it will give 3 melee attack to monsters that don't have any attacks themselves. And it has Reach, which is a big deal because what this means is you could put something like Idri in the first position with no attack, and then put this card in the second position, and in any rule set, you're still going to have this card attacking and Idri attacking. So this is really powerful in that like it can be used in a lot more scenarios. It's 8 costs, so you're going to be able to use it in most games. Just the really low cost games, you probably won't want to use them in. And so I think that this is going to be a really desired card. It seems very appropriately priced. It seems very strong. Reflection Shield is a great ability to have in second position, especially if you have a taunting tank in front. And so if you're allowed to kind of just put this guy, park him right behind a taunting tank, anybody that has blast on the opposing team is going to get that effect completely nullified. It's not going to matter. And this whole like combo that they've set up here to allow the Fire team to kind of just excel and really nullify a lot of hits going for it, I think really buffs Conqueror Yasik. And we're going to see a lot of cool plays, I think, with that team, as well as just I think you're going to see a lot of use out of this card. I think it's going to be a must-have for most people. So I'm very excited to get my hands on that one as well. And then finally we come to Soriel the Bale. And so some of these cards, I just want to mention real quick, have gotten changes since the videos that were made last night about them. So I'm actually kind of glad that I delayed the stream to today. But essentially these cards have been changed and tweaked a little bit already. So obviously what you're seeing now is subject to change, but they do have, some tweaks made already. So in case you have noticed some changes there, that's why, is that they're constantly tweaking these cards and updating them. So let's get into Soriel. Now, I think that this is another really powerful card. This one might actually be more niche because I don't think its abilities make a whole lot of sense. Like for just this card, it actually has some support abilities that are tied onto it that up its cost a little bit. And so I think you're going to see less use out of it than the card we just talked about. But that being said, it's still really strong and these abilities are incredibly desirable. So you're definitely going to want to incorporate this into your decks when applicable. So let's take a look at his different stat breakdowns. So he starts with 2 attack, magic, and double strike. So that means he's getting off 4 damage. If you can find a way to pair him with like Jotun to give him blast, I mean, that can really do a number on people with magic damage. So just another avenue to get some extra damage out. But even without Jotun, I mean, that's still a respectable amount of damage at level 1. You're gonna put some things into the dirt with that. And so yeah, it's a bit expensive, so you're not really going to be able to use it all the time. But when you do get to use it, I think that he's going to be really powerful. And like blind is helpful. He doesn't have a whole lot of speed to take advantage of blind. So again, he's really supporting his team there. So I could see this going really well with something like Conqueror Yasik because you're getting the +2 speed across the team. And with the scatter fire, he's throwing out 3 damage at different targets, and that could potentially kill off a target with lower HP. And, it guarantees that you're not just hitting that frontline tank over and over again, right? Like, so you are spreading the love a little bit, but it could help. And so that rust too also helps, even though something like Conqueror Yasik has piercing, still getting rid of 2 of their armor if they have more than 2 armor is helpful. And even if they don't, you've still gotten rid of something that could have, prevented you from doing damage. So this is definitely a really high quality card, and I like the state that it's in currently. I think there are some trade-offs, namely this high mana cost to using it, but you're still going to want to incorporate it when you can, which I think is ideal. So really cool card there. Like that one a lot. The art is also really cool. I forgot to mention that. Okay, so up next, let's talk about water. So the Swamp Spitter. Not the coolest name, but he kind of looks like a Ninja Turtle, so I can't knock him for that. Pretty cool card. And so this guy is a 7 mana ranged attacker with 4 range damage, 4 speed, 3 armor, 6 health, repair, and giant killer. So I don't think that this card is particularly good in its current state. It does a lot of damage for its mana cost, so that's good. But like its mix of abilities is kind of weird. Like the whole repair and giant killer thing, it's not screaming like, staple in my opinion. I think this card does have its niche and it will fit into it well. Like if you run him with Kelia, everybody gets +1 armor and you'll be able to repair most of the cards on your team, like your frontline tanks, for example, or your taunting wave brood in the back. And so this card I think does make sense in certain matchups, but he's not going to be like an auto include like some of the other reward cards in this set. Like you're not going to use him all that often. Still a nice tool to have in your toolbox though, and I do think that this will be one that I'd like to have maxed out at some point. The Coastal Sentry. Now this card gets me excited just because of its pure damage potential. Like 5 damage on a 10 cost card doesn't sound like a lot, but when you pair it with double strike, piercing, and knockout, wow, that is like 20 potential damage that it can do in 1 turn, which for a melee attack monster is a ton. It seems like it's really potent and can potentially, absolutely destroy your opponent's front line, even 2 monsters if you're really lucky. And so like this piercing ability is nice for water because they don't have a lot of ways to get that naturally. And the double strike means that, if you can find the right rule set for this guy, or you use them with Possibilis and put them in the second position, then she'll be able to make sure that, she's dealing the maximum amount of damage but not taking very much. Because for 10 mana, she only has 10 total HP between armor and health, and so that's really not enough to put her in the first position unless you've got a taunting tank in the back, which is totally doable in water if you put like a wave brood in the 6th position. But in general, you're going to want to put this in the 2nd position and try to give it reach, or use it in a rule set that allows for melee attacks from any position. So definitely one to look out for. I think that this is going to be really powerful. It's even really good at level 6 once you get that piercing, like still 4 damage, just 1 HP down from its max level. You're just missing that knockout, which is pretty situational. I mean, you'll have cards that can stun in water, but you may not necessarily be using them with this all the time anyway. So still a really good card at the lower levels too. And so I'll be interested to see what people can pull off with this because it has some insane damage potential. Yeah, it might get nerfed. I'm not sure. We'll have to play around with it some more. Hey, Cuff, nice to see you here too. I'm glad that you were able to catch the stream, man. I hope you enjoy. I'd love to chat with you sometime if you've got some different views on things. That sounds awesome. Okay, so up next we've got the Riverboat Captain. So 6 cost card, magic dealer with blast. I don't really have to say anything else, but I will because that's why you're here. So let's go take a look at the stats. Now, even at level 1, this card is pretty potent because 2 magic damage with blast is nothing to sneeze at in bronze. And once you get him up to level 4, he gains affliction, which can be really powerful. He's still pretty slow, which is definitely something you've got to watch out for. If you pair him with Kelia to give him an extra speed and armor, I think that would help him quite a bit. But really once he unlocks is when he gets to this 3 damage, because that means that blast is dealing 2 damage to the adjacent targets. So that is like a huge goal that you're going to want to set to try and get this card to, is that level 6, and then I think he will really come online. Plus the ability to have Fury, he's potentially doing 6 damage magic to taunting tanks, and so while still dealing 2 damage to adjacent targets. I mean, really, really strong card. Kind of reminds me of the old, where is it? I think it's a reward card. The Ruler of the Seas. Yeah, here we go. This guy. Not quite as good, obviously. Same mana cost, 1 less damage, equivalent speed and HP, but the swiftness and silence abilities are probably just better than the abilities that this guy has. But that's okay, because the Ruler of the Seas was probably a little overpowered in his day, and they want this card to be different, right? So it can't be the exact same card. I do like this card just about the same. It's just a little bit worse than this card, for example. But at least this one's in Modern, so you'll have the potential to use him there, and that is really cool. So up next is the Pembroke Nymph, or the Sultry Wood Nymph, if you're following the FTX saga. So this card gives +1 health and allows you to use an additional Gladiator. So again, I think this is going to be hyper situational. You're going to have like really good Gladiator cards in order to want to even try using this card, in at least for your league. It might make a lot of sense if you're in Bronze and you have a guild and you're trying to like skill up a little bit, but you have some of those early Gladiator cards for water. Because +1 health is definitely nothing to scoff at, but like even compared with the one we just looked at for fire, this guy gives -2 armor. That is way more impactful, in my opinion, than +1 health. While survivability is great, health is like maybe not the stat you would want to give +1 to. Like, I don't know, +1 armor unlocks some things in other cards by giving cards that have no armor, in addition, the ability to take an additional hit unless there's magic damage involved. And so that can be even better than the +1 heart. And so for 6 mana, I just can't envision myself using this card all that often at all, even with some of the powerful gladiators that water has access to. So I'm not sure about this one. Hopefully it gets adjusted upward, but we'll have to play some games with it and see how it goes. So I almost set up next Tidebiter, but that one we already have, and it is a great card. So hopefully you've already secured one of those, as it'll be going away soon. But here we have Noah the Just. And this card seems really strong to me as well. I just like the abilities it has. It seems like a very good tank. And so for 5 mana, you're talking about 13 total HP split between armor and health, with 6 speed, dodge, and backfire. So you're talking about if I'm attacking you and I have 1 speed, that then means that there is a 75% chance of my attack missing. So if you can find ways to lower the opponent's speed even, or increase your own speed even more, like with Kelia, for example, to get up to 7, wow, look out. Like, you're never going to hit this thing unless you have a magic attack. And there is actually a way to get phase on this card if you are going to play with the Dragon Summoner from the Rift Watchers expansion that gives phase. So you could technically make this immune to magic as well, or make it so that it has to go against the speed check. So that is really cool. I think it's going to open up a whole lot of avenues for the speed meta, and that this card is going to see a lot of play. Rust is also just really powerful as an ability, because most cards have armor and it will take a hit if you're a melee or ranged and you don't have piercing. And so the ability to nullify that, or at least get through more of it, is always impactful and helpful. And so I just see this card getting a lot of play personally. Martyr is also great too, because if this is in the first position, odds are most cards are going to be attacking it. Or if you're in a super sneak rule set, you could put this guy in the back, still going to get hit most of the time. And so Martyrdom is going to give him the ability to kind of buff up the rest of your team after the enemy is able to even hit him, which might take a while because this guy's going to be so tough to hit. And yeah, even at Bronze, like 6 speed with 9 HP and the Rust ability, I definitely play this at Bronze. Like, it's a really strong card. I think he's going to see a lot of play. Very good. Okay, so up next we have the Kulu Mastermind. This card is just really cool thematically. To me, like, they did a really good job with the art here. Very, Eldritch, invoking all of those themes of Cthulhu and whatnot. And so really, really cool from the arts and lore standpoint. From the ability standpoint, I think he's also really strong. He's got weapons training, shield, oppress, and enrage, and a decent amount of speed and damage. So I think this guy's going to be a really solid frontline tank in certain scenarios, and you can use him with Possibilis too to give weapons training to the card that we just talked about that doesn't have an attack. You could put him in the first position, Kulu Mastermind in the second position, and then you could even put another, card without an attack, like the Kelp Initiate that has Cleanse in the third position to take advantage of these attacks in like something like an all melee rule set, or melee can attack from any position rule set. And so I think there's going to be a lot of niche use cases for this card, so it's going to get a decent amount of play. That being said, it could even function as a main tank as well, if you could have some way to get the card in the second position to benefit from weapons training and attack. So if you can find the right combination of rules and cards to play this guy in, he's an auto-include. I just don't know like the frequency that that's going to occur, so we're going to have to test this guy out. But to me, he seems like a no-brainer when you're able to really utilize most of his rule set, because Enrage with that much speed and damage is going to absolutely turn this guy on. He's going to be insane, especially with a press. I mean, you're talking about a 30% boost or 50% boost with Enrage. So that gets him up to, I believe, 6. It might be more than that, but I think it's 6. And then with a press, he'll do 12. So that's a ton of damage if you can get that to trigger correctly. So really cool card. At level 1, I don't see him getting that much use. I mean, for 8 mana, you might be able to utilize this with weapons training, but he really unlocks at level 2 when he gets that shield. So we should be able to use him even at the lower levels in like higher level play, which is exciting. Hey, Alistios, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate you being here, and thanks for the commentary, man. This is some really cool stuff here that we get to talk about today, so I'm excited. Thanks for joining. All right, up next we have Musa Saline. Well, I think it's probably saline, like, the ocean, so I guess that makes sense. Musa Saline. And so she's a 3-cost legendary, which I kind of like because that means you get to use her a lot more in the different various mana costs, because, if you have those higher level mana legendaries like in Rift Watchers, you don't get to use them all that often. Even at the higher levels of play, it's like 50-50 shot really that you're going to get a high enough mana game to utilize it. So I think that it having 3 mana means it'll fit into a lot more comps and you'll be able to see it a lot more, which is nice. And I think for 3 mana this card seems very competitive. It has 2 magic damage, which is solid. It has 4 speed and 3 health, which could be better, but for its purpose is great because it also has Scavenger. And so if you put this nestled in the middle of your team and it lasts a decent amount of time, I mean, this could stack up to be quite a lot of health. I mean, we've seen it before with Dr. Blight, very similar style of card to this. And, eventually that card can become strong enough to like win you the game as like a backline, that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise been able to win because Scavenger gives you so much extra health. And Shatter doesn't necessarily benefit magic all that much, although it does work really well if you're going up against Grandmaster Wraith. And so that can be a nice little bonus. If you are fighting against that team and you're going to fight against that team, you might want to take Miss Saline here. But Dispel is going to be awesome too, because you'll be able to dispel the Bloodlust, the Martyrdom, you'll be able to dispel, all sorts of different abilities and whatnot. So that is just like a nice little cherry on top. But I really see this as just being an anchor for your team and providing Shatter for units that might not otherwise be able to get through armor very well, which we do see a decent amount of water, like melee units that are very strong but necessarily don't always get through armor all that well. So this might be a good option to support your team and deal a decent amount of damage while giving you a late game anchor in case the game doesn't quite go your way. That Scavenger can really help out. And even at bronze, I mean, this card might still be really impactful. We'll have to see. But for 3 mana, still getting that 1 damage and Scavenger, I mean, that could be really strong early. So excited to see that one out on the field. All right, we're into Earth. So Earth looks very cool. I like the themes that they've kind of done for Earth this time around. They've got a lot of different stuff. So you've got the Fungus Flinger, the Terracious Grunt, Lob Lowland, who's like some ape kind of guy with fungus on him. Ava the Undaunted, who seems like some kind of adventurer. And then the Terracious Hulk, which is just, a big rock. So they went with a lot of different stuff for Earth. And I think that the art direction on this is overall pretty cool. It doesn't necessarily fit in with the themes they've kind of, put out prior, but Earth has like a lot of different creatures and things in it. So it definitely fits like the fungus with the mycelium warriors and the Terracious Grunt with some of the other stuff. So there's definitely precedent here. And it kind of just rounds out that whole Earth splinter that they've created. So excited for that. And then the abilities that they have here seem really good. So let's hop into it. The Fungus Flinger is a 3 cost, and it does 2 range damage with 4 speed and 4 health. So pretty good there. But it also gives Martyr, which can be very impactful if you're able to get it to trigger. +1 to all stats is nothing to sneeze at unless you're in reverse speed. And Blind is very helpful as well because that's just a flat 25% chance to miss, or I think might be 20. It's a flat percent chance to miss. And so Snare plus that, so you can remove your enemy's ability to fly in case you're using flying monsters like the Regal Periton, for example. If you remove the enemy's ability to fly, then they have to take another 25% chance to miss you. And plus Blind and maybe Martyrdom at some point. I think this card gets a lot of use as a nice little helper to round out your team. He's not going to carry the team by any respect. I mean, he's just going to help out. And if you put him in the 6th position, or he gets hit with opportunity because he's got some pretty low health there, I mean, he's definitely going to be able to help your team out in that respect as well. So he's just all around a support, and for 3 mana you'll be able to include him in a lot of games, which I think is really great. Hey Cuffed, all right, so quick aside here. Hey, yeah, I only meant on your Town Star to Gala topic. I agree that some early supporters like yourself got the shorter end of the stick with the Town to Gala conversion. However, just trying not to talk about this on your Splinterlands stream. Well, fair enough. I guess I shouldn't have called it out then if you were trying to be nice, but yeah, I mean, it's totally multifaceted, right? So there's people like me who may have gotten screwed over on it. But there's also people that are going to benefit from this, like newcomers to the ecosystem. So I can understand why they did it. Personally, I just wish they would have consulted with the community before making a change like this. It just seems like something that we really could have voted on in order to have like a say in the system and try to gauge more, engage people that are here and try to get them to feel like they're validated in their opinions and able to contribute in a way that, they've invested a lot into this ecosystem. They should be able to participate in the changes that are being made to it, right? I think Gala is trying to stand for community and create a safe space for everybody to voice their opinions, but it doesn't seem like they're taking a lot of that feedback into account. And so I would just like to see, some more community polls on this kind of stuff and like get some feedback from the people who've been supporting from day one, because that is important. You don't want to make your fan base that's been there since day one upset, like if you don't have to. So, to me, this just seemed like a change that they made to kind of pump up the price of the Gala coin, and it didn't seem like it was in the benefit of the people who had been supporting them from the beginning. So that's why it upset me personally. Jarek LG, yo, love the vids. Keep going. Thank you, man. I really appreciate hearing that. It means a lot. All right, so let's get into the next guy here. I won't keep you guys waiting too long. So up next, we have the Terracious Grunt. This is a 6 cost tank. So he's got 4 melee damage, 3 speed, and 12 health. It's a pretty solid tank line stat, especially considering Void, which means that he'll be able to really negate a lot of those magic attacks that are coming in. Only taking half damage from magic is really strong. Magic is still a really good attack type and very prevalent. But even if you're getting hit with range, he's got return fire. And so that can mean that he can fit into some different rule sets, especially if there's no melee rule set. This guy's going to come out perfect. Smelling like roses, as they say. Necessarily use this guy all the time in bronze. I don't play a lot of bronze myself, though, so maybe I'm speaking out of my butt. But as far as like this stat line goes, it seems very impressive, especially at those max levels. And so I could definitely see myself using this guy situationally to tank in lower mana matches, and I think he would do a great job at that. You're not going to see him all the time. He's not going to be super impactful, but he's going to do his job and he's going to do it well. So I'm excited to have him added to the game. Cinti, thanks for the echo there, buddy. Appreciate you. All right, so up next we have Madcap Magus, and this guy at 4 mana I think makes a lot of sense. He only does 2 magic damage and he only has 1 speed and 4 health, which so pretty weak stats, but the cool thing about him is that he has life leech in order to benefit from stealing 1 extra health away after he hits somebody every turn. And he also has Affliction and Dispel, so he's going to negatively impact whatever he hits in a substantial way, which is also really nice. So he's a very good support unit, and he might be able to anchor your team if you get down to that like very last battle between, you know, a couple of weaker cards on the team. So he's nice in that respect, in that he can become much stronger than his initial stat line and would suggest. And so for that, I think he's going to be really useful. You're not going to fit him into every team, and that scatter shot might give you some grief occasionally if he hits like a really buff target or something that he's not really going to hurt all that much. So that's unfortunate, but the cool thing about scattershot is that it also means you can reach things that you wouldn't normally be able to reach, and with the Affliction and Dispel, that could become very prevalent and important. So I think you're going to see this guy really unlock at level 6 when he gets that Affliction. And obviously that level 8 Dispel is really nice to see, but that's going to be much harder to obtain for most people. And so I think he'll be perfectly usable at level 6, even in the higher leagues, and at level 8 he's going to really unlock, and you'll be able to use him more often. But yeah, niche card support, but could be very helpful, especially in those lower mana matches. So enjoying that one. So up next we have Lob Lowland, which, first of all, cool name, cool art, love that. I don't know that I think I'm going to use this guy very much. -1 speed is probably one of the better, you know, things to have as far as like a plus or -1. -1 speed is very impactful. However, just like the 6 mana for this guy plus the only like 1 gladiator card thing to be used, I just don't see myself being able to utilize this guy very much for 6 mana. I just think that there are other cards that might be better. Like if you compare this guy, Lob Lowland, to Immortalis, the summoner that just came out from the Chaos Legion airdrop. They're both the same mana cost, but he gives -1 health, Void, and Shatter. This guy has rickrolled me occasionally. Like if you run into the right kind of team comp, Immortalis can really give you a run for your money. I don't really see that happening with Lob Lowland. I mean, the Gladiator cards are really strong, and that can't be underestimated, but I don't see a scenario where I would take Lob Lowland over something like Immortalis, where he fits into a lot of niche builds very effectively. I would probably go with something like Fernheart or Obsidian over Lob in the places that Immortalis doesn't work too. So while I think this is a great addition to the game and it might see some play, I feel like it's very niche, and that 6 mana is a big part of the reason why. I kind of thought they would make these guys 5 mana, which I think would make a lot more sense. But maybe they're planning on introducing some new Gladiator cards in the future or something like that. Because even with the ones they have today, like let's take a divergence here and look at the Gladiator cards for Earth and see if, you know, maybe one of these guys would be worth you taking Lob Lowland for. Now, obviously, Jin Gai's here is a really strong support with Protect, Bloodlust, Blind, Silence, and Resurrect. Like, wow, you could really get a lot of use out of her. Same with Korra Tower's Head. I mean, very strong cards. But I mean, unless you've got a maxed out version of these guys, I'm not sure that I would want to take Lob, and maxing out Lob is going to take quite a while as well. So maybe in a year or two, we'll get some real good use out of Lob Lowland, but I think for right now, it's not really something to get all too excited about, unfortunately. So up next, we have Thane Newsong. Lob Lowland, aka Bob Lob Lob, Bob Lob Lob, Slob Blog. Love that. Pretty well. Okay, so Thane Newsong. He's got a little banjo here. He's plucking away, ready to go. So we have a 4 cost, 2 speed, 9 health card with Inspire, Strengthen, Swiftness, and Headwinds. Wow. That is like, if I had to pick one set of abilities to put on a support card, it'd be this one, because wow, that is amazing. You're given +1 melee, you're given +1 health, you're given +1 speed, and you're reducing enemy ranged attack. Like, talk about a power card. And even at level 1, I mean, it still gives Inspire. You'll be able to throw this in as like a secondary off tank and buff up some of your cards. I mean, I think it's really strong. Level 3 is when you'll really unlock its potential here with Strengthen, but I would want to max this as soon as humanly possible, because it is a really powerful card, and I could see this getting a lot of play in Earth, even for 4 mana, which is kind of expensive for a support, because with weapons training you can actually give him an attack too. So definitely a card I can see myself using a lot. Right, up next is Ava the Undaunted. So Ava the Undaunted, 8 cost, 4 range damage, 2 speed, 2 armor, 6 health, legendary card with weapons training. So this one gives you ranged weapons training, which I think is a lot easier to fit in than like melee weapons training, for example. So this will probably see more play than some of those options. And it has shatter, knockout, and oppress. So these abilities aren't super impactful on their own, but when combined, I think you're going to see that one of these abilities gets used most of the time. And so for that, I think she'll fit into a wide array of decks as just an overall solid card. She doesn't stand out as like, wow, this is like the most amazing card ever to me, for example. But I do think she seems appropriately balanced at first look, and that she seems like she'll be strong in a lot of different scenarios. So for that, I think that she's a really good inclusion. Okay, so Cuffed said, yeah, I completely respect where you're coming from, and you have great points. I also bought this Fox for 11 grand in June, and recently have been hit with the Townstar earning news. But I'm not mad like a lot of other people about it. I actually see how these fundamental changes will only be better for all asset classes within Gala. Yeah, Cuffed, I think that that's a great point. It definitely could be positive for Gala in the long run. Give it like a year or two, and I think that this will get swept under the rug and it won't be a problem, and it probably will be the right choice. I just thought it was interesting that, they made this big hubbub about, launching a coin for every game like a year ago, maybe less at this point. And then they're kind of already backpedaling on that decision and like not telling the community about it, the people who invest in it. So that's where I'm coming from. That just miffs me a little bit. But I definitely think that you could be correct as well, and that we might actually see this being a positive for them. It just seems like a little bit of a waste there per se for some of the early supporters. So that's unfortunate. But if it's positive for Gal in the long term, I can't cry too much about it. So that's good to hear. All right, so up next we have the 11 cost Tenacious Hulk. So this guy, I think he's going to get a lot of play. He's got 6 melee attack, which is really strong. Only 1 speed, but that's actually really nice if you're in reverse speed. So that makes him an auto include in that rule set, really. And 7 armor plus 11 health, so he has a ton of HP. He's got taunt, which is awesome. Really good to have another taunting tank in Earth. I think that gives them 3 options now if you include the neutral taunt. So that's really strong. And you also have Void Armor and Demoralize, which are both really, really, really good abilities. Like Void Armor is so strong, especially when you have this much HP. So it essentially makes it like it has 18 health, which is a ton. Now I know it costs 11 and everything's going to be targeting it, so it could go down pretty quick since it doesn't have anything to mitigate damage like shield, force field, or void armor, for example. But this card could still be really good with what it has, especially if you're able to grant it some kind of extra, ability like void through Immortalis, for example. And so with Demoralize, I think that that's going to make him really strong in the melee only matchups. And even if it's not a melee only matchup, he's going to fit into a lot of lineups with Void Armor. So this guy's going to see a ton of play, I bet. I think he's a really strong card. I don't think he's overpowered either. I think he seems on first glance to be very appropriately balanced. So I hope that I'm right about that. But really cool card overall. And he's a rock, so what's not to like? Okay, so up next we have Life and the Imperial Knight. I really like the art for this card. Very cool. I used to play a game called War Machine, and he reminds me a lot of the paladins in that game, Menoth. And so a lot of really cool memories from that. And so this guy's bringing it back for me. He's doing a lot of really cool stuff, it looks like. So got the Imperial Knight. He's 7 cost, does 4 attack in the melee variety. He has 3 speed, 7 armor, 9 health. And I think for this stat line and abilities, like he's going to see a ton of play. Like he seems really strong. You could probably use this guy as a frontline tank, no problem. And so with Void Armor, this means that you could actually use him without Grandmaster Wraith, which is great because Ilthane exists, and so you could use this guy with him. And that gives Ilthane a little bit of extra play and gives Life an option to take a tank outside of something like the the other taunting tank, the Shield Bearer. And so you might consider this guy over the Shield Bearer in some certain scenarios, and so I think that that's great that they're adding some extra options for that. Heal plus Magic Reflect, Void Armor, and Divine Shield, like chef's kiss, like super good tanks abilities. If you could find a way to get him shield or void armor somehow, I don't think that that's possible right now in life. But wow, that would be really cool. If, for example, it's like a, no ranged rule set, this guy's going to be awesome. And I think that there are certain rules where this guy's going to make a lot of sense as your frontline tank or even an off tank if you're given the opportunity. So really cool card. I think he's going to see a decent amount of play. Seems really strong. Up next, we have the Drybone Barbarian. And this card I like a lot. Like, just a really cool like art. Seems like a really badass guy there. And so 9 mana, 6 damage of the melee variety, 4 speed and 12 health. Like, plus enrage, retaliate, and knockout. Like, talk about the Desert Dragon 2.0. I mean, this card, if you're able to get some damage on it to where that enrage will kick in, it can get up to 9 melee damage and 6 speed, which is insane. Like, that will knock some stuff out if you're able to get it piercing or you're able to get rid of some enemy armor through rust. And then in like a melee only rule set, or if you know your opponent's going to be kind of melee heavy, with something like Super Sneak, you could put this in the back line. Retaliate is going to give it a ton of utility and make it so even you could use this as an off tank or your frontline tank if you have a taunt in the back line, for example. So this guy I think is going to see a lot of play just for his raw damage output and potential. There's a ton of stuff that you could just beat to death with this guy. He seems really cool. So excited for him to be in the game. And up next is the War Pegasus. So this card has 7 mana, 4 range damage, 5 speed, and 9 heart. So another really solid backline support. It has flying, shatter, and demoralize. This is kind of an odd mix of abilities, but I do like that it has demoralize on a backline unit because that means you could potentially bring this in even if you're, mostly planning melee or in like a no magic rule set where, like there will be some melee on the enemy team, most likely, you're able to bring this guy in and get like a guaranteed, demoralize and not have it mess up your front line or anything like that. So that can be really helpful. And shatter is just nice all around. I wish it had like piercing too in order to like utilize that 4 damage more, but shatter still helps. So it's gonna block an attack regardless of that with that armor. But shatter can still be really helpful on those big taunting tanks with a ton of armor. And so I think this card will see some use. I just don't know how much. It seems very niche, and you're probably going to see it more once people have it fully maxed out and they can utilize that demoralize, because that's a really strong ability. Now we have Franz Ruffman. I really don't see this guy getting much play outside of, the obvious of him allowing you an extra gladiator. +1 armor is nothing new to life, and I would take Grandmaster Wraith over this guy 10 times out of 10, honestly, in my current state. So I think maybe he could use a little buff, but that's just my first impression. There are some really strong gladiator cards for life, and so this guy might definitely be tuned correctly. I just don't see him getting a lot of play in his current state. He's nothing like meta defining for sure. Okay, so up next we have Evelyn Alvera. This card I think is really awesome and will see a lot of play. And so Evelyn has immunity, thorns, repair, and inspire. So there are so many inspires in life. It is like, if you want to buff damage, you go to life like that. There's so many inspires in this team now. And the repair ability with her high natural armor means that she could even be a good primary tank with that thorns too. And so if you have something with reach that you'd like to give an extra melee attack, she fits right in. And she only has that inspire at the last level though, so that does limit that ability a little bit, but she unlocks thorns at level 3, so she could fit in really well in like a Noxious Fumes rule set as your frontline tank. Or if there's not going to be any magic, with that 8 armor, I mean, that's a lot of armor to chew through. If you take her with Grandmaster Wraith, for example, she gets void armor and an additional, so she'd be at 14 HP that can't be chunked through with magic. So that would be really strong. With only 2 speed, that kind of limits her, but that's not really her purpose. And so I think that this is a really strong card that's going to see a lot of play. All right, up next we have the legendaries. So we have Ave Sturgis, a 6-cost, a 6-cost legendary here with 3 magic attack, 2 speed, and 3 health. This one is the first weapons training magic attack dealer. So obviously this guy is really strong and he's going to see a ton of play because magic is the best attack type. And 3 magic is nothing to scoff at for a 6-cost card. I mean, his health and speed are where he really gets let down, but he also has redemption, so in case he does die, you know, he does get the last laugh, so to speak. And Rust really helps out the rest of your team. Or if you're playing against Grandmaster Wraith, Rust is also very nice. So, you know, this Rust is one of my favorite abilities in this game. And seeing this guy with such a strong stack of stats and abilities in life, where it's very easy to amplify those and, you know, protect this guy appropriately, I think you're going to see this guy a lot, for better or for worse. And once he gets that 3 attacks so that he can give 2 magic damage to adjacent monsters with weapons training, wow, that just really opens the door for him. Obviously, you're going to want Rust too, but you can't control when you get this guy, unfortunately, for a while. So I'll be looking to try and max him as soon as I can, but obviously, you know, hopefully the gods of luck favor me on that quest. So up next, we have Iziar. And Iziar is a really cool card. I think this card's going to see a ton of play. Like, very, very strong. 11 mana, so it means you can't really use it at the lower tier games, but with 3 magic damage, 3 speed, and 14 health, in the games that you can use her, you're going to see her because she also has Taunt, Void, and Martyr. And so, like, Taunt plus Martyr is the obvious combo, right? Like, everyone should aspire as a tank to have Taunt and Martyr. Those are, like, such good abilities. But then you also have Void. So now she's taking half damage from magic attacks. If you put her with something like Grandmaster Wraith and you're expecting a heavy magic lineup, good luck even getting through the tank. I mean, this card is so good. I just can't believe, you know, the current state she's in. She might get nerfed, but the thing is, she does have a weakness, and it's melee or ranged attackers, because with no armor and no shield or return fire or thorns or anything like that, you know, she's certainly weaker to those type of things. But magic is undoubtedly the strongest attack type, and you will run into it a decent amount of the time. So I think that this card definitely counters that really well. And there will be certain matchups and rule sets where this card just absolutely dominates. And so I think you're going to see a lot of it. It's going to frustrate you when you see it up against you. Now we're moving on to Death. So here we've got the Possessed Puppet. Excuse me, which is just a really cool concept. The art is fun. It's got some like demon teeth on that side. Whoever did this did a knockout job. Very scary puppet. Don't like it at all. Terrifying. Great card. 7 mana, 4 melee damage, 6 speed, and 5 health. With double strike, cripple, and dispel. So in my eyes, what this means is that you'll be able to get the first hit, and that will probably destroy all of the enemy's armor. It's very rare for cards to have, you know, more than 4 armor that aren't like, you know, frontline taunting tanks. And even if they do, you know, then you just get to use cripple twice. So you'll hit the first time with and destroy most or all of their armor, and then you'll get the cripple off, so they'll lose the max health. And then the second hit will probably kill it because, you know, unless it's a frontline taunting tank or something with a whole bunch of HP and armor, this guy is just going to be able to get through it no problem. So in rule sets where this card can attack from, you know, the midline, so for example, where melee monsters can attack from any position, this is an auto include. It is so strong. Even for 7 mana, I mean, this is such a competitive stat line. With 6 speed too, I mean, you're going to be hard pressed to get an attack out before it does. So that dispel is really just icing on the cake. But you definitely don't want this guy in the front. Like, it's way too squishy. So even, you know, at this level 6 delineation, 5 speed with 4 damage and double strike and cripple, really good. The 3 health is a bit of a limiter, but upon leveling up, you know, that kind of alleviates a bit. It's still 5 health is very squishy. So you'll have to be able to protect this card, but it's definitely worth protecting. It is incredibly good. So up next we have the Wily Kaioshin, which I just love. I think this is really cool that they put this in the game. It's a nice homage, and it looks like it's really cool art, and I will be very excited to get this one. So 2 mana, 2 melee attack, 5 speed, 3 armor, 6 health, and phase. We're getting phase and death again. The last card that had phase and death was the Nightmare, and I love that card to death. This is like a Nightmare Light with only 2 mana cost instead of 8. And so for that, I think it's going to see a lot of play once you're able to get phase on it. This card does a lot. Even at level 1, I mean, you wouldn't be, you know, if you could fit this into your deck, if you needed something to round it out, it would still be helpful. But once it gets that phase, then it really goes into a world of its own with that 4 speed. And so I think at max level, you're going to see this guy a ton. At lower levels, you might not see him too much, but he's still really helpful to kind of round out your deck. There are a decent amount of good like 2-cost cards in Death, but I think this guy just gives you another option for that. And then once you unlock phase, then he kind of goes into a league of his own and really hits his stride. So excited to see that one on the field. Up next, we have the Ravenhood Warden. And so this guy is a 4-cost, 2 range attack, 3 speed, 4 health. But he also gives Protect, which means that he's going to have 2 armor on himself and 2 armor on everybody else on your team. And he's going to give monsters +1 melee attack. And he's got Fury, so he deals 4 damage to monsters with taunt. So just all around, like, very solid support, but he's able to actually deal damage in the right circumstances. And for that reason, I think he's going to see a ton of play. Even at level 1, having Protect in Death is pretty rare. And so this guy's going to see a lot of play just for that. But then once you unlock Inspire, you know, that's something that a lot of cards in deck in Death, could really benefit from. So I think he's going to be really competitive, see a lot of play. You're going to want him at max level for that Fury, but even without it, you know, he's still really solid. So definitely a card I'm excited to have. Then we get to Octavia Shadowmeld. So I'm going to echo this a bit more, but I don't think that this card's going to see a ton of play just because, you know, most people aren't going to have these high-level gladiators, and even if you did, you know, it might not make sense in every scenario. But when you're able to utilize her best, I think she'll be okay. I just think it's a very niche card, and this -1 health doesn't really justify her 6 cost, even with gladiator. So you're just going to have to be able to use her at the high levels of the game with as best of gladiator cards as you can muster for your particular bracket. And then she might see some niche uses. So unfortunately, that's just how these cards all are. It's great that they have a new mechanic that we can play around with and add these gladiator cards to our deck. So hopefully you have some good gladiator cards for your league that you can utilize in order to get the most out of this card. So up next, we have the Will-O-Wisp. This is another really cool one. I think I see this one getting a ton of play. It's very strong. So it's a 6 mana cost, 4 speed, and 12 health card with Flying, Weaken, Silence, and Blind. These 3 stat debuffs are so strong. Like Weaken reducing a health, Silence reducing a magic. I mean, that's Thaddeus Brood right there. Like you're paying a summoner for that. And Blind means you have a higher chance to miss, with Flying giving you an extra 25% chance to miss against creatures that don't have it. With the 4 speed, I mean, wow. Even with only 12 health, I mean, you could put this in the front in lower mana matches, frontline tank. And a lot of attacks will miss it. If you're able to give it phase through something like Sispa, the dragon summoner that has phase, and you put this in the front, I mean, there's a good chance that your enemy just won't be able to hit it for a very long time. And so for that reason, I see this card getting a lot of play, especially once it hits level 4 and you get that silence ability. And then again at level 6 when it gets blind, like those are really big buffs to it. And so this level here, it's kind of a speed bump and you might not see a whole lot of use for it unless you've got weapons training. But at this stat line here, really good. So definitely excited for that one. And here we come to Score Duskblight. So this guy, another magic weapons trainer, like so good. I think that magic weapons training is going to be the ones that you see the most. It seems like he's a Cthulhu guy or Cthulhu. He's got like those little tentacles coming out of him. So just assuming on that, we don't have the lore out for this guy yet, but just taking a stab at it. He's got the cool Warlock Flame coming out of his hands. So really, really sweet card. 3 magic damage at the highest level with weapons training means he'll be giving 2 to adjacent. And he has Fury, so he can deal 6 magic damage to taunting monsters, which is so good. And he has Resurrect, which is a really strong ability. If you have a card with taunt, like for example, the new Rift Watchers taunting card that came out for Death. Oh, wrong set, sorry. The Night Ghoul, if you are able to... Oh, why did I think he had taunt? I'm sorry, guys. He doesn't have taunt. Who am I thinking of? There's a card with taunt in Death. The Dark Hoan would work. Is that the only one? It might just be the Dark Huan. So if you're lucky enough to have that card, he's very useful with it in order to kind of, you know, resurrect a taunt. And with the void with that much health and armor, you know, it'll be very helpful. But sorry for the tangent there. Resurrect is still really good, you know, no matter what kind of situation you're in. Giving one of your offensive units that was struck down a little early the ability to kind of come back to life, like even after an opportunity, like something like a Kane Haste, for example, who only has like 2 or 3 health. If he was taken out, you can resurrect him. He'll still be able to deal a ton of damage again. You know, that is a really strong ability that cannot be underestimated. So love seeing that. He does get it at level 3, which is great. But you're really going to want him at max level for if you're going to utilize him for weapons training, so that he can give extra damage to the guys adjacent to him. So I would love to have this card maxed. It's going to take a while, which is, again, something I'm really sad about for this set because it's really cool, like the reward cards that they're putting out. But like I can't be too excited because it's going to take me forever to get them. So, you know, it's kind of a letdown in that respect. It's a slow burn. You know, I'll be grateful for it in a year, but it's just I'd like something now, you know, to appease me in that sense. So it's unfortunate, but we're going over him here. And you know, the meta is going to evolve quite a bit in the next year. And so maybe some of these cards that aren't so good now will get even better. So here we have Usut, or Usut, I'm not sure. He is 10 mana with 3 magic damage, 1 speed, 4 armor, 11 health. He has flying, Bloodlust, which is great. He's one of the only cards with Bloodlust outside of Gladiators. And, well, Grum has it. I think Grum was the first. But he also has a Press and Heal. This is a very competitive stat line. With Bloodlust, if he's able to kill anything, he's able to really amplify because getting more magic damage, speed, armor, and health, I mean, what's wrong with that? It's going to be awesome. And with flying, if you can actually get him up to a decent count of Bloodlust, I mean, he could potentially be very difficult to hit. And a Press means he's going to deal double damage to no attack enemies, so that could apply quite frequently now with these new changes. Heal means that, you know, he could even be a great tank if given the right circumstances, like an off tank. And so, yeah, I think this card is going to see a ton of play. I mean, really strong card, like very cool. When you're ever able to fit him in, I think he's going to be extremely powerful. So can't wait to see that guy on the field. All right, now we're going to cover Dragon. I believe there are only 2 cards and the Summoner in Dragon, so it should be fairly quick. But here we have the Helios Matriarch. So +1 speed, which, you know, speed seems to be the Dragon theme, so that can be really good. And the additional gladiator. So Dragon does have some really strong gladiators. I think of the ones of the summoners that have released in this reward card batch, I see myself using this one probably the most, just because +1 speed is the meta right now. It's still really solid. It's no Byzantine Kitties +2 speed, but that's okay. I mean, for what it is, it's very solid. And it allows you to use a gladiator, which Dragon has some really strong gladiators. I believe, you know, that's a great question. I'm not sure. You might be able to use the gladiators from the element that you selected. I guess that would be the case. And so in that case, I would definitely use this card more than the other ones because you'd be able to use the other gladiators from like fire, for example, if I chose fire as my secondary element. So we'll have to see if that's how that works. I would imagine it does just from reading the cards. So if that's how it is intended, then that's really exciting. So up next, we have Krar Zok. Some little snake shaman guy. Really cool art. 1 cost, which is nice. He's the lowest cost card in the set. No zeros, unfortunately, but he does have 2 speed, 5 health. Scavenger, which is awesome. I mean, the ability for him to kind of get that more health as the game goes on and become an anchor might be really nice. He does have silence and camouflage. Now, he doesn't have an attack, but you can give him one with weapons training, so he might be the cheapest card that you can give an attack. I don't know if there's a 0 cost card with no attack, actually. I think the only other card that I can think of without an attack at the 1 cost price point is the Slime from the Alpha and Beta release that gives you slow. So this card is going to see a lot of use with weapons training, I think. It's very strong for that. Plus, Silence and Scavenger are nothing to slouch on. Like, it's really strong abilities. Camouflage is so-so. I mean, it could be useful, but I just don't know, how useful it will end up actually being. So I think the breakpoints here for this card are definitely at level 4 when you get silence. That's a huge deal. But you could probably also use them at bronze if you have weapons training, or just as a speed bump. I mean, 3 health isn't nothing for 1 mana, so if you have 1 mana left over, you could fit him in. Then last we have Barrack's Snake Eye. And so this card is a 10 mana card, so you won't be able to use him all the time. But he does have 4 range damage, 8 armor, 7 health, and 2 speed with weapons training. So that means he'll give half, so 2 of his 4 range damage to adjacent cards without any damage type. And then void armor, which means that this is effectively 15 HP, which is really solid. So he's a good off tank. And then oppress and true strike, which true strike is a really big deal. Not a lot of cards have it. And this will allow it so that he cannot miss, which with speed being kind of the meta right now is definitely really important. So I like him for that. Plus with the press and him being able to damage an enemy with no attacks, I mean, that seems like a really solid combination. I think this guy's going to see some play. He's not going to see a ton of play just because of that 10 mana, but when you're able to use him, I think he's definitely going to fit into a lot of decks that could really appreciate him. So up next, we have neutral. And there's just a few cards here. I believe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So actually a decent amount of neutrals compared to like Dragon per se. And so we'll start with the Gobson Bomber. So this card I think is going to be really situational, but like if you go into a higher mana battle, like say a 99 mana battle per se, you'll definitely find a use for him because he is able to deal an insane amount of damage. So he's only 7 mana. Well, I say only, he's 7 mana, and he has 3 range damage with 5 speed and 5 health. But what's cool about him is that he has recharge, so he doesn't attack every round, but when he does 3x damage, so that is a drawback, but he does have camouflage, so he has a higher likelihood of surviving to get to use that recharge. And he has piercing, which means that the damage that he does do is not going to be able to be negated by armor, which is the biggest problem with recharge monsters thus far. And he also has fury. So if you can anticipate that your opponent is going to bring a taunt monster, which is highly likely in higher mana battles, especially now that they're so prevalent in the meta, there's quite a few options for taunt monsters. I mean, this guy could deal a ton of damage. You're talking about 6 times 3, so 18 damage potentially if you are taunting. And so that can't be, that goes through armor. So it's definitely like situational for a very specific circumstance, but he is so good at that particular circumstance. So he's going to see play. The Dumak Orc. This card's pretty cool. Like the art and theme seems like a pretty strong girl with like those cool goggles. I like that. It's really cool. You've got 6 mana here, 4 melee damage, 8 armor, 2 speed, and 1 heart. So I think that the 1 heart is really kind of damning. I mean, you're only going to be able to use her in Equalizer rule sets, or if you can get her void armor, or if you know that there's not going to be any magic. In that case, she's really strong, but otherwise you're not really going to be able to use her. So that's kind of disappointing. But she does have shield, retaliate, and thorns. And so in those cases where you're going to be able to use her, she's going to be a great frontline tank that you can really benefit from. And I think for that, she's going to see a decent amount of play, especially because she's in neutral, so she can be used anywhere. So definitely a really cool card that I'm excited to see. Pretty niche, but will get some play. Up next, we have the Venari Marks Rat, which is really cool. I love the Venari theme that they've gone with, like the little Skaven type rat people. Very cool, like thematically. This card is 3 mana, so you'll be able to include it in a lot of different lineups. It has 2 archery damage, 3 speed, 4 health, Martyr, Snare, and Shatter. So Martyr is obviously a really nice cherry on top for this card. I think it's going to, not always be impactful, but when you do get the trigger, it's going to be really helpful for your team. And then Snare and Shatter means that it can really help to kind of support your other pieces. If you have like a primarily melee and range setup, like you don't have a lot of magic, Shatter can matter quite a bit. Or if you're going against Grandmaster Wraith, Shatter is really helpful. Snare is just another nice piece. So this is a situational card, and it won't fit into every team. But with 3 mana, you'll probably find a team where you can fit this guy in, and he'll be really helpful. Snare isn't necessarily super critical, and neither is Shatter, so you'll probably be able to use him no matter what level you have him if you find the ability to fit him into your team. Next, we have the Clockwork Aid. This is a epic card that costs 4. It has 1 speed, but it has 9 armor and 1 health with no attack. It does have Swiftness, Rust, and Strengthen, which are really good abilities. We talked about this earlier, but they're some of the best supporting abilities you can get. And this guy only being 4 mana means that he will probably get a lot of play just for that. He does only have 1 health, which again, as we talked about with the Dumak Orc, is definitely a downside. But if you can find the rule sets where that won't matter, or you can negate that somehow, that will be really helpful. And it is giving itself Strengthen, so it will technically have 2 health, but that's still not a lot. So something to keep in mind. I think you'll see the most use out of this guy at level 4 when you can get Rust. But even, just a level 1 with Swiftness, in the right rule sets, he could be a good off tank or tank and allow you to kind of, utilize him in different scenarios. Very situational, but very powerful card. And then finally, we have the Drybone Raider. I think this might be my favorite card of the set. It's just really strong, like from a damage output perspective. It can do so much damage. And it's really cool, like just this orcish theme. Very sweet. 12 mana, so you won't be able to use her all the time. But when you do get to use her, she packs a wallop. 2 range damage and 3 melee damage with double strike. So that means that there's a potential for, 4 range damage and 6 melee damage at the same turn. So 10 total damage plus cripple on each of those attacks and shatter. So like if you can find the scenario where you can get her to attack with every single attack that she has, she's going to absolutely decimate the enemy team. Whether that be through Possibilis giving her reach and you put her in the 2nd position, because she's not really tanky. She's only got like 11 total HP. So you're going to want to find a way to protect her, but also get her to utilize all of those attacks. And so if you can manage that, she's going to be a really powerful card that will allow you to win games. And I definitely like her. I think she's going to see a lot of play. So with that is all of the cards that we have for today in the new Soulbound reward set. So I'm really excited about them. I think that, hopefully you can tell that, but wow, it's been a lot of really cool stuff here to show off today. I'm glad that we got to sit down and go through everything. Thank you guys for being here. If you'd like to learn more, I'll be discussing it with my friends over at the Web Freedom Discord that I operate. I will post the link for that here in case you guys are interested. But essentially, thank you, Alyssa. I'm aware I'm finishing up. So we've got the Web Freedom Discord there in case you guys want to check that out. Hopefully, you're interested in that. I'm trying to build a group of like-minded individuals to secure financial freedom. And Splinterlands is just a part of that. It's a fun game that I like to play, and it's also something that I put some money into. And so for that, I'd like to talk about it over there some more with my friends in my group. But hopefully you've enjoyed this conversation today about these new Soulbound reward cards. I think they're definitely really solid, and that they're going to see a really cool place in the meta going forward. So without further ado, I'm going to end the stream and go check on my company, but I really appreciate spending this time with you guys tonight, and I thank you for being here. You guys have a good night, and I'll talk to you again soon. More videos coming out later this week, so stay tuned, but I'll see you then.